Well, up until this year, this has been a very exciting year surrounding the death penalty in Nebraska. We used the electric chair as our only method of execution. And this year, the Nebraska Supreme Court struck down electrocution as a method of executing people. And this brings up the inevitability, as we hear from our governor and attorney general, that we'll probably be having a debate about lethal injection. For those of our viewers who might be thinking, you know, the electric chair was a really bad way to kill people, but it seems pretty clean and pretty clinical to use lethal injection. Could you address that?
Sure. You know, lethal injection is a lot more complicated than it looks. One of the things that's been kind of called out over and over again about lethal injection is that when it was first developed, it was sort of developed with no real research or testing by one random guy in Oklahoma, and then every state just started copying what they did. And so the same lethal injection process got first copied by one state and then another state and another state, and now every state that uses lethal injection for the most part is using the same process that was created almost randomly by one person who didn't know that much about what they were doing. And then at the same time, not only is the process sort of flawed, but for the most part, the people who are carrying out the process have no medical training, have no, actual training in how to get an IV in somebody or how to measure the drugs. I mean, lethal injection is sort of a medical procedure, and it uses drugs that medical professionals have a lot of training in knowing how to use, and the people who are administering them have none of that training, and there are none of those, medical professionals who are doing the work. So there's been a lot of cases of botched executions with lethal injection. There's a drug that's commonly used in lethal injection that's actually banned from animal euthanasia because it's so faulty. But even more so, because of all those problems, the courts have really kind of stepped in and intervened and said, a lot of state courts are looking at lethal injection and saying the process has to change. You either need to have a doctor present or an anesthesiologist, or you need to have better training, or different kinds of things. And so there's no answer right now about what is a way to carry out lethal injection that's actually constitutional.
So how does that play out in the legislature? If a lethal injection bill comes up and it's supported, wouldn't there be constitutional challenges more than likely?
I would not doubt it. I mean, I think that the lethal injection debacle, if you will be litigated through the courts across this country for the next 2 decades at least. I mean, I have no doubt that the lethal injection controversy is only just beginning. And you're going to see, it's just one more thing that's kind of making cases stall, get overturned, be re-examined by the courts. It's opening a whole new wave of litigation challenges. And that goes back to everything that I was saying before about why the process is so costly, so painful for victims' families, and really just not worth all the hassle.
I'm going to ask you a ridiculous question because this discussion lends itself to these kinds of questions. If there's a supporter out there of the death penalty, but they're a little conflicted about the electric chair and they hear this information about lethal injection, I mean, is there another form of execution that could be brought up that would fit the legal requirements, whatever those may or may not be, that would allow executions to move forward in Nebraska?
Well, I'm not a medical expert, so it's not my area of expertise. The lawyers who have litigated the lethal injection challenges will say that there are ways that you could execute people that wouldn't have the same problems that what lethal injection currently uses a 3-drug cocktail. And the reason that a lot of the executions have been botched is because the first drug, which is supposed to kind of paralyze, it's like an anesthetic, doesn't always kick in, and so the drug that kills you is actually excruciatingly painful and you suffocate to death. And you feel it, but you can't actually move and tell anybody that you're feeling that kind of pain. So there are doctors who say that there are ways to do it that you wouldn't run into that problem, but you run into other problems with those methods. So, you can use longer acting drugs, but people don't really want witnesses to have to stay there for an hour watching somebody die. Like, what people like about the current process is that it's quick and easy. You still have the problem of who's administering the drugs and who's putting in the IVs. I think at the end of the day, the technical aspects of which method you use and how you execute someone is completely off topic. I mean, it just doesn't get at the heart of what the problems are with the death penalty as a whole, and the fact that the system itself is so broken that it doesn't matter what method you come up with to execute someone. You're never going to fix all those problems.
Well, we're getting close to the end of our show, and we're very happy to have somebody from Washington, D.C. here with us, somebody who works for a great national organization. And maybe you could reflect a little bit on your experiences and talk about some of the greatest successes you've seen relative to fighting against the death penalty nationwide, and maybe touch on some things that were hard for you to kind of see play out. Just reflect a little bit on what you've seen in your travels throughout the country.
Sure. Well, I've been lucky enough to be involved in a number of campaigns that have actually been successful, so that's been really exciting. I was part of a campaign that abolished the death penalty in New Jersey this past December, and that was actually a seven-year effort. So we saw a lot of setbacks throughout the course of that campaign, but New Jersey did become the first state in 50 years to abolish the death penalty last year. Similarly, in New York, the death penalty was sort of overturned on a technicality through the court, and it was an opportunity to go into the legislature and really kind of question whether or not that technicality was worth fixing. And the legislature really did decide, you know what, we don't need a death penalty anymore. Let's just let it go. You know, we've been part of the moratorium campaigns in Maryland, and have been working closely with the folks in Montana who've been having some successes. We're really excited to be here in Nebraska. It's been an exciting couple of years for this movement, and I think sort of politics aside, what's really probably been the more rewarding is the people who are so impacted by the system that I come across every day, people whose daughters and sons were murdered and husbands and wives were murdered, and you know, people who should be full of anger and bitterness and who have found a way to come to healing and to turn the tragedy that's happened to them into something positive. People who are sentenced to die who are innocent. And I know you've had some people here in Nebraska who can come and tell that story and have turned that traumatic experience into something positive. I mean, coming across those people is probably more rewarding than anything because they're so humbling and so inspiring.
Well, thank you for that. This is the Watchful Citizen, and you're a watchful citizen, and we're very happy that you are. Why is Shari Silberstein involved in social justice work?
That's a very good question, which I've often asked myself. And I don't know that I have a simple answer to that question. I mean, for as long as I can remember, I feel like being a good person was something that was important to me, and that can mean any number of different things. I think everybody believes that they want to be a good person. But to me, what that meant was that it was sort of important to not only live in a world that was good to people, but to try to be part of making that happen.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time. We've had Shari Silberstein with us, the Executive Director of Equal Justice USA. What's your website?
EJUSA.org.
All right, and my name is Josh Cramer, the host of The Watchful Citizen, brought to you by the Lancaster County Democrats Public Relations Committee, and we are all volunteers, so have a great day.